Hotel, good morning, family. The congressman is in the house, so once the congressman arrives, everything is okay. Am I correct? Yeah. Show your love for Congressman Danny K. Davis, one of our beloved leaders, if not the most beloved one. And as you welcome him, I need to pause right now and introduce his Director of Constituency Development and Program Operations, Queen Sister Nicole Harvey. Raise your hand, Queen. She's done all the work to make possible along with who you'll meet in a second, Sister Annetta Wilson, who is the Executive Director of the Sankofa program there in Chicago, Illinois. She'll be speaking to us very shortly. But I want to just call you to attention so that as the congressman comes to welcome you in his own fashion, we are already in session. He has 1,000 things to do today, but we want to make sure we utilize his time as well as we possibly could. So as he takes a sip of some cranberry juice, I will assume he will be moving to the podium as expeditiously as he possibly can. Am I having this right?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right, Congressman. But we do want to thank you for coming out this morning to join us. We're going to have what I think will probably be the best brain trust of all the brain trusts. And there are some announcements that from time to time I will be sharing with you. And maybe what I'll do, Chester, you gotta be right near me. Where are you, Chester? Come, move right here. I need you to do me something while I wait for the congressman. Thank you. What I'd like to do is to call your attention to several things while the congressman prepares to come. Did everybody receive a copy of this? If not, let's see. This is a blue copy. If not, on your way out, make sure you do. What it does is describe what's going to be happening all day today and then on tomorrow. For example, there'll be a brain trust from 2:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. today called the Community Health Center's Brain Trust. It will be held in room 145A. This again under the auspices of Congressman Danny K. Davis. Then on tomorrow, it's a must that you attend his reentry brain trust, which starts at 10:30 a.m. and will run through 2:30 p.m. in room 143A, which is this room tomorrow. Now, if you have not attended one of the Congressman's reentry brain trust sessions, you have missed the best one in the world. I've been able to attend all of them for the past 4 or 5 years. As you will recall, he was the author of the Second Chance Act, which really gave all of our returning citizens an opportunity to become full citizens again. This is the person who has made that possible for us, for all the reentry and community returning citizens. So we want to make sure you come out and support that effort. I had someplace an announcement about student loan.
That was handed out.
It's handed out, but the young lady wanted to make sure to remind you to please read that. Young lady, is there anything else you want us to say? Why don't you just stand up right quickly and say what it is that you want to be said?
If you know of any public servants with federal student loans, we just encourage you to reach out to them so that they're aware, because this money is first come, first served. So we just want to make sure.
Loan forgiveness.
Thank you so very, very much. As a matter of fact, I've got a copy of it right here in case you need to get more information about that. So I think we are almost ready for the congressman to come and welcome and officially open this session. So without further ado, if it's okay with the congressman, please show your love by giving the congressman, Danny K. Davis, a warm, what is this? Congressional Black Caucus?
Yeah.
You did? I wanted to make it the Black social workers. He would run me out of town. But again, welcome our beloved Congressman Danny K. Davis.
Thank you very much. Lynn, thank you for all of the many years long before you became the Commissioner of Children's Services and all of those kind of things. You know, leadership, I've always defined as the ability to get other people to do what you want them to do, but because they want to do it. And so as long as they want to do it, that means that they have internalized whatever it is that you're talking about. So let me thank you for getting up early in the morning. We always caution the foundation that it's difficult to get to 9 o'clock sessions. No matter what they say, I've been doing this a long time. And it's always difficult for that first round of punctuality. As a matter of fact, I thought of my father, who we always thought was the most punctual person in the whole world. As a matter of fact, we would often go places and nobody would be there except us. We were good church people. We belonged to the Methodist church. Of course, Methodists, you know, they got their own special behavior. And I never will forget going to church one Sunday. Nobody was there but my father and I. And about 30 minutes later, the young preacher came in and he was on time. He'd just been appointed. And in the Methodist church, the bishop appoints people. So he had just been appointed. And after being there for about 30 minutes, still there was nobody there but he, my father, and I. So he looked out at my dad and said, Brother Davis, says, I noticed that nobody here with me, you and your sons. What do you think I ought to do? And so my father said, son, let me tell you, I said, I'm a farmer. I ain't no preacher. He said, I get up in the morning and get ready to feed my cows. I load my wagon full of hay to go on down to where they are. So the young preacher took that as cue. He went ahead and had a congregational song, read the scripture, both the Old and New Testament, gave a prayer, and he did the glory patri. Then he took up an offering for the prayer. Then he took up a special offering. Took up a building fund. Went on with the sermon. And after he got finished, he asked my father, he said, well, Brother Davis, how did I do? He said, son, you know, like I told you, I'm a farmer. I ain't no preacher. He said, when I get ready to feed my cows, I load the wagon full of hay and go down to where they are. He said, but son, if over 2 of them come, I don't give them the whole wagon. I am afraid that we have a wagon load. We always do. And I want to thank all of the distinguished panelists who have consented to join us. And I'm absolutely certain that the information we will receive will be super useful. I want to thank Annetta Wilson for always kind of, Ms. Wilson is the chairperson of our local Child Welfare Task Force. I'm a firm believer in what I call democracy. And that is, if I'm going to represent people, then I need to know what they're thinking. I need to know what they want. I need to know what their thoughts and ideas are. So I have about 20 working groups. One of those is the Child Welfare Group. I got a working preachers group. I got a working educators group. I got a working health group. I got a working every kind of group that you reentry. They're the ones who wrote the Second Chance Act. We're pleased about it because more than 800 agencies, organizations, groups, correctional institutions, jails, prisons, churches have gotten grants from the Second Chance Act. And not only that, there are many programs that don't get money from the Second Chance money, but they use the concept of second chance. There was an excellent article in the Chicago Tribune on Sunday talking about the fact that people have begun in a significant way to hire more individuals who've been to jail and prison. Interesting thing, the best entity in the country, Uganda, is John Hopkins University Medicine. They are always listed as one of the top hospitals in America every year. 1, 2, 3 sometimes. All the research that they do suggests that these individuals do as well as any others when it comes to performing after having been hired. So we decided this year, there's been a lot of conversation about reconnecting families, reconnecting children with families. Of course, much of it has to do with the immigration debate. But it just occurred that we had millions of children already, not because of immigration, who are disconnected from their families. Matter of fact, in my congressional district, there are more children who live with someone other than their natural parents than any other place in the United States of America. And that's why one of the programs that another group has developed called Grandparents Raising Grandchildren that comes out of the Sankofa House. And they've been fortunate to build a residence for everybody there, grandparents raising grandchildren. And just this past Sunday, I had the opportunity to stop by where they were honoring outstanding grandparents who were raising their grandchildren. And if it had not been for them, many of these children would be sleeping in abandoned cars, under viaducts. They would be homeless. They would be lost. So I want to thank everybody that is involved with that kind of activity. Little did I know that much of our focus would be on child welfare. That has not been my area of work. But then when I ended up on Ways and Means Committee, and I ended up as the ranking member on human resources, that is the subcommittee that has basic responsibility for shaping our child welfare laws in this country, and especially trying to help provide the economic resources that can do the most to help these disadvantaged low-income children. And so we sort of ended up like the rabbit and the briar patch. I mean, no better place to be. And it's a good place to have landed. Because our children, as one of the songwriters said, teach them well and let them lead. Show them all the beauty they possess inside. Give them a sense of pride. And then let the children's laughter remind us of the way we everybody is searching for the hero, looking to see what can inspire, motivate, stimulate, and activate them. So, thank you all for being here. I'm going to give myself another cup of coffee. My pen and pencil and take notes. And thank you.
The eloquent storyteller. There's no one who can frame the issues and make you feel at home better than our esteemed Congressman Danny K. Davis. Show your love again for the Congressman. As he said, he is always ably supported by a very caring and wise staff. And one of the persons I'd like to introduce now is his Deputy Chief of Staff, Sister Jill Hunter-Williams. Would you just stand and be recognized? She's the one who gave us information about the position a second ago. Thank you, Jill. And now we want to be welcomed to this occasion by, you heard him speak of her a second ago, and that's none other than Sister Annetta Wilson. Now, I want to just frame her introduction a little bit further. I've had the distinct honor of working with Sister Annetta Wilson for almost 40 plus years. She worked, when I was president of the National Association of Black Social Workers, she was one of our key experts on child welfare. Let me also suggest to you that if you're ever in Chicago, please take a moment and go by her program, the Sankofa program. It's, as you heard the Congressman say just a second ago, in my humble opinion, it is the best example of how grandmothers, grandfathers, and grandparents are supposed to care for their children. The home is immaculate. The apartments are like you and I would want our apartments to look. So without further ado, I want to ask that she will come and just give us some remarks and welcome the remarks, and then we'll get into the heart of this morning's brain trust. Thank you, Queen Sister Annetta.
It's on. Okay. Good morning. Good morning. I am so delighted to have and see all my, there's some friends that I haven't seen for a whole year, but I am so glad that you came out to share this time with us on this, what I think is one of the most important issues we can talk about, and that's child welfare. I know that the Congressman is very vain when he talks about now he is the topping person who's pushing family first and those kind of issues for child welfare. But I want to give him kudos because I don't think 14 years ago he knew much about child welfare. We introduced it to him and he ran like a rabbit. And so now he is what I call one of those experts that has been educated by us, because it was all of the brain trust that we gave him this information. And it was the panel, several of the panelists that are here today have been here before. That's because they have something to say. So I am going to be quiet and I want to listen to what's going on so we can make a report and further give the Congressman information to help him to be the best Congressman congressman he can be, although I think he's great anyway. But we always try to help him to be better. And if I don't get a chance to say it, I want to thank everybody, but particularly my friend here on the end. I haven't seen, about 5 years? You can't stay awake that long. But anyway, I want to thank Leonard and my friend Roz back here for helping to get everything together. So with that, I'm just going to be quiet and listen like you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sister Netta. As Sister Netta said, it's a team effort, and I would be remiss were I not to, at this moment, to acknowledge those who helped me assist the Congressman and Sister Netta in pulling together what I know will be an expert and one of the most informed group of panelists that you will hear throughout the next day or so. First, I want to start with Brother Chester Marshall. Chester, just stand for a second. He's tall enough for you to see, 6'6", former basketball player. But what's significant about him is his relationship to Chicago. He's a native of Chicago. He's now adjunct professor at Howard University School of Social Work. HU, as they say here, I think in DC. Oh, okay. So they're in the house, and he's going to do several things. First of all, I need to sort of let you know that he's also the co-convener of the Institute of Black World 21st Century's Black Family Summit, of which I'm the convener of. So I want to thank him for being there for me in all of these instances. Since 2005, we have worked together with the Black Family Summit to co-convene it. He also has brought with him about 6 of his students. I have at least the names of 5 who are with him. And what they're going to do is to record this session. As you hear our presenters present, the students will be making notes, taking notes. For those who will be making policy recommendations for the Congressman's consideration, that will be done in a neat packet which Brother Chester Marshall will pull together along with his students. He will also, once we end the presentations by our panelists, Brother Chester will facilitate the question and answer session. And that's going to be a working lunch session. He's already passed out cards. As you sit, you will find a little card. And the purpose of that card is for you, as you listen to the presenters and you might have some questions, we want to expedite this process by having you write out your questions, and he will then facilitate following through with describing what the question is, and we'll get a response from our panelists. That way we hope to sort of conserve time, and because we know everybody's very eloquent when they get up to raise questions. So we thought that this might be a way to help you with your eloquence do that. Secondly, I want to also just recognize that it's going to be happening throughout this presentation, or these presentations, several comrades and friends throughout the years who have come to join us. I want to first recognize the former commissioner, associate commissioner, I should say, of the New York State Department of Education. She is now the board chair for John Henry Clark House at Howard, and also the board chair of the Elders Historical Society House in Selma, Alabama. And that's Dr. Reverend Sheila Evans Tranter from Brooklyn, New York. I also want to recognize the presence of the international president of the Association of African Classical Civilizations. He's also a professor here at Howard University Department of African Studies, and that's none other than Dr. Mario Beatty, who's in the back, and also Congressman who was at Chicago State for years, upon years. So I got a little, Chester's also from Chicago. I want to make sure those in the house know that we have a Chicago presence here. Oh, you heard the Congressman? He's a graduate of Chicago State. And on this stage, you will, the panelists, you will meet some of those who are also either still living in Chicago or have roots in Chicago. I also want to recognize another friend of ours from Philadelphia who's doing great work around violence prevention for our families. Sister Dorothy Johnson Spate, who is Executive Director of Moms for Peace out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. One of my closest allies, I don't know how she was not introduced at the very outset, a sister who has helped make the work that we do, Institute of Black Growth 21st Century Black Family Summit. As all of you are aware, there's a hurricane that is settling on eastern part of North Carolina. And let me just put this in context. If you've been watching the news, you know that there's been a flood in a place called New Bern, North Carolina. Have you been watching that? Well, that's where I grew up. That's my home. I have family as we speak who are impacted directly. As a result of that, I was on the phone this morning and last night with friends to find out how they're doing. They have no electricity, and on the list goes. But suffice it to say, it's very close to me, it's very personal to me. The Outer Banks, you've heard about the Outer Banks of North Carolina. That's where my father is from. We just had our family reunion there a week ago. A week ago and a half, we just had our 60th high school class reunion in New Bern, North Carolina. That's where I grew up. So my heart's a little bit heavy, but I wanted to sort of put that in context because the sister I really would like for you to meet now is none other than Dr. Anel Prim, who is the convener of the All Heals and Mental Health Alliance. Stand up, Sister Anel Prim. A psychiatrist by training. And you've been meeting a lot of psychiatrists because you can see I'm a little challenged, so I need a lot of help. And I'm surrounded by psychiatrists. But this sister has been convening, Congressman, since 2005, every other Sunday night, a conference call around disasters, most specifically those that have been impacting the African community. And what she has been able to do is to mobilize services for our people when they are impacted. So I just can't thank her enough for being here this morning. As a matter of fact, she should have been on stage. However, she deferred to another queen who is on stage, that's Dr. Severe, who is Haitian. And it was Dr. Prim's suggestion that in light of the fact that we're doing a panel on immigration, and we're going to talk about protective status of Haitians, she said, why not have someone who has that impact personally? So I want to thank her for deferring and allowing Dr. Severi to join us this morning. That's Dr. Anel Prim. I will stop there because it's time to receive the panelists. I want to just say that for the most part, I've had either a direct relationship to most of them or an indirect relationship. So sometimes you will hear me veer off course as I introduce them, but that's because I've been connected to them for so long, it's hard to separate them from family. And as I introduce a psychiatrist, Dr. Nana Pat Newton, I'll talk about her just a little bit later, but as I told you, I've had all kinds of mental health issues throughout my life, so I couldn't just have one psychiatrist, I needed two psychiatrists. So I've got Nana Pat, and then I got Sister Adele out of the audience, and I just acquired Dr. Severe over the past month. So for those of you who are having any kind of psychological problem, see me, I'm the expert, I know exactly who to refer you to. We have to add a little, humor to this life. Life can be extraordinarily stressful. So you always need to find a little outlet, and you can do that in a way that is not, I think, like that idiot who sits down at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. But I can talk about something like that because I'm a veteran, and I suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. So anything that I say, it can't be attributed to the fact that I know what I'm talking about. It's just that my post-traumatic stress disorder kicks in every time I see that stuff. So forgive me. Now let's get into, I got to introduce our tech person. Nothing happens in a session like this without a person like Sam. Show your love for Sam, our tech person. I don't know the brother who's doing the camera work, but he's great also. He's just show your love for our tech person. There's another camera person.
Thank you.
How am I supposed to stand? Like this?
It's okay. It's okay.
Again, we plan a little bit levity to this. Let me start now by introducing our panelists. They have, and this is sad to say, but they have 7 minutes to present. The opening, we're going to frame this. So to frame it, the framer will have about 13 to 15 minutes. Now, I want everyone to know that there'll be some cards, someone will be sitting with a card. And when you get down to about 3 minutes, you will see a 3-minute card. Then you'll see a 2-minute card. And the next thing you see is say, well, stop. So we don't want to insult you, but we want to let you know that someone is out there with a little card to make sure we stay within that time frame. Now I'd like to introduce our first speaker, and that's none other than Attorney Esmeralda Simmons. I need to say that I have known Esmeralda for also about 40+ years. Let me not give you all of her background, because all of you, I think you received a copy, right, of the program? But I would be remiss were I not to highlight a few things. First of all, she has had an established and robust career as a highly respected attorney. Ms. Simmons specializes in racial justice issues such as voting rights, educational inequity, cultural rights, and human rights violations in the U.S. She has served as the first Deputy Commissioner of Human Rights for New York State, as a New York State Assistant Attorney General, as a New York City Assistant Corporation Counsel, and has also served as a law clerk to federal judges. She's also been involved in major civic associations, and the list could go on. I've had the honor, along with a friend that I did not introduce, my business partner and my former Deputy Commissioner from Barbados by way of the Republic of Brooklyn, New York. That's Gloria Rosalind Brunon. Ron, stand for 1 second, please. She, Esmeralda, and I worked together for what's called now the late father of the current governor. He is Andrew Cuomo, but we worked for his father. Esmeralda was as I just said to you, was the Deputy Commissioner for Human Rights there. She's also, why she's on this panel, is because she's had direct contact or experiences with immigration issues. Her parents are from St. Croix, and in New York City in particular, if you need to know anything about immigration law, about census work, redistricting, and the like, there's none other more knowledgeable than Attorney Esmeralda Simmons. So she will frame the issue for us. Then we will move to, make sure I got this order correct, to Dr. Neva Lubin Johnson. Now let me pull Dr. Johnson's notes. I think I have her notes. If not, is it in the program? It's not in the program. Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Let me share with you a little bit of background about Dr. Neva Lubin Johnson. She's been an advocate of quality health care for all of its 119th presidents of the National Medical Association. It is the 123rd year of the history of this organization. She is the third president and first woman to serve as president, Speaker of the House of Delegates, Chair of the Board of Trustees. She was in the last class to finish her medical degree in 3 years from Southern Illinois University and completed internal medicine at St. Joseph's Hospital in Chicago. Dr. Lubin was in private practice for 29 years. She doesn't look that old, and continues to serve on various committees at 2 community hospitals on the south side of Chicago. Dr. Lubin is vice chair of the Women's Physicians section and has been chair of the Minority Affairs section of the American Medical Association. She is a member of the American College of Physicians and life member of the National Medical Association and Alpha Kappa sorority. Did I mispronounce it? What did I say? Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority.
We're going to help you.
Incorporated.
Mrs. Davis is also a member.
Okay.
You're going to get it right.
Okay. Nothing like a family. She believes in the need for wellness and preventive care to prevent physician burnout and is a laser focused on increasing the numbers of African Americans entering and completing medical school and completing residency. She's also joined by her beloved husband, Shil. Raise your hand, my brother, so everybody knows that this sister's already been taken. move to our third panelist, and that's Sister Dr. Jennifer Sevier, and her focus will be on mental health of Black immigrant families. And I should have said that the focus of Dr. Johnson's will be on medical challenges. Now, I know I saw Dr. Sevier's bio. Let me pull that up. Yeah, here we are. Dr. Sevier is a native of Haiti, where she completed medical school at the State University of Haiti. She did her psychiatric residency at Bay State Medical Center, Tufts University School of Medicine. She is a former visiting research fellow in global health and social medicine, Harvard Medical School. She did a public psychiatry and fellowship at Columbia University before joining University of Michigan Medical School last July as a clinical assistant professor in psychiatry. She also has interest in, her primary interest is mood disorders, collaborative care model in primary care settings, and immigration-related mental health issues and global health. Dr. Sevier is a volunteer radio host on integrated physical, mental, and spiritual care in Haitian Creole, specifically crafted to educate Haitian immigrants on their mental health. She's joined by her brother, Dr. Harold Sevier. Harold, where are you? There he is, right? Just stand up there. So her family is here. The next person that you will hear from is none other than Dr. Nana Patricia Newton. Her focus will be on human trafficking. Now, her bio is so long, I decided I didn't know where to start. Like I said earlier, I've known Dr. Newton. Let me again, and I hope you're not offended by any of my comments, but I've had a little trauma in my life that's really personal, but I'll share it with you. On November 29th of 2016, my wife of 54 years, our partner of 58 years, Gladys Deborah Stapp Dunstan, made her transition. So as you go through these kinds of transitions, you need someone that you can speak to who can understand and help you process the bereavement process that you will continue to go through for the rest of your life. But Nana Pat, Sister Annelle, Rosalind Prudhomme in particular, I need to just publicly recognize, along with it, I will introduce him a little bit later, Katea Sim. But I say that because all of us need to have someone in our life at some juncture to go to when you have no way of how you're going to cope from day to day. So I wanted to say that about Nana Pat Newton. She's a psychiatrist, a behavior scientist specialist who is currently the president and medical director of Newton and Associates and president of Newton Talk, International Meeting Planners. She's a graduate of the University of Arkansas Pine Bluff, and the congressman can relate to that because he has roots in Arkansas. He grew up there, where she received an undergraduate degree and received a master's degree in molecular biology from George Peabody College, Vanderbilt University. She completed a medical school of education at Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis. Her psychiatric training at the same institution was followed by receiving her master's degree in molecular biology from Vanderbilt University Peabody College in Nashville, and a master's degree in public health and degree from Johns Hopkins Public School of Hygiene in Baltimore, Maryland. Dr. Newton is also internationally acclaimed lecturer and published author of several. She is an Ashanti Royal, having been installed as both Queen Mother and Female King Divisional Chief in Ghana, West Africa, where she is known as Nana Dr. Okosawa Akaye, with full rights and privileges that this esteemed position holds. Her clinical psychiatry focuses on anxiety disorder with special emphasis on PTSD, depression, chronic mental health illnesses, transcultural psychiatry encompassing the interface of Western and traditional African healing systems. Our next presenter will be Sister Marion Smith Reynoso. And I know that her bio is here also. let me quickly move to that. Sister Marion is a widow, mother of 6, grandmother of 22, great-grandmother of 18, and a great-great-grandmother of 2. She doesn't look, I've been trying to figure this thing out. I'm as confused as you are, but I'm accepting what I'm reading. I have been around this sister now for 3 years, and how she is able to be, I don't know how all this happened. Marion is a 25-year member of St. Charles Bawanga Church, where she serves as a Eucharist minister, proclaimer of the word, and chairperson of the Evangelization Committee. Marion is a present member of the Diocese of Pittsburgh Pastoral Council, St. James Catholic Church Social Justice and Peace Committee. She is newly elected Province Director of Philadelphia for the National Council of Catholic Women, and she's also past president of Pittsburgh Diocesan Council on Catholic Women. She will be speaking to us on social justice. Now, the next speaker, I think, would be Kate Asim. And I really don't need to talk about Kate from the notes, but I will refer you to his bio. Kate is very special to me, again, context only. When my wife made her transition, it was her desire to have her remains taken to Ghana, West Africa, to the town of Tiller, where she had lived for years. Kate is, if you ever have an opportunity to speak with him, he speaks 18 languages fluently, African languages. He spends now, and for Chicago context, he was, as you will see in his bio, he was the Chief Operating Officer and President of Chicago State Foundation as a fundraising arm of Chicago State University. On a very personal note, he was my executive assistant when I was commissioned in New York State Division for Youth for 9 years. But beyond that, he's currently on the continent of Africa for a minimum of 8 weeks, every other 8 weeks. He just got back about 3 days ago, so he could be here for this conference. He just got back from Ghana. He was in Rwanda, he was in South Africa, he was in Ethiopia, and I could go on and on. So, Kate, when we talk about how do you frame this immigration issue from a cultural perspective, he knows it like no one else that I know. Not because he's my friend, but he's had that experience. So he will be laying out for you the cultural context of why the immigration issues that our families are struggling with are so significant. The last presenter, I didn't finish the point about my wife. We decided, I told you a second ago that I grew up in New Bern, North Carolina. That's where I met my wife in high school. So what we decided to do when she knew that she was transitioning was to send part of her remains to New Bern, which I took to New Bern. And then Kate took the other remains to his village, which is where my wife would spend 2 or 3 months with his family when she would go to Ghana. So that's the significance of the connection I was trying to make. Now, did I introduce Tony Oliver?
No.
Oh my God. How can I not introduce Tony Oliver? I just want to go off memory. I got a bio someplace, but I'm so off-centered now, Congressman. Am I doing okay though? Yeah. Introducing the people? Because I've been listening to the Steve panel, and it's not, you just can't fluff it. You got to talk about who they are. Because all the time people come to a workshop and say, well, how do these people get up there? What do they know? I want you to know that we just don't bring fluff. We bring the real thing. This is the real deal what you're about to receive. I know I've been a little bit long, so forgive me. At 78, I'm doing the best that I can. Sometimes this thing don't kick in. And I did not take my meds this morning. I'll confess. Sister Tony Oliver is the immediate past president of the National Association of Black Social Workers. When I was president, she was my, thank you. When I was president of the National Association of Black Social Workers, she was my national spokesperson on adoptions. When it comes to adoptions, which will be her presentation format, there is no one in this world who's more expert on adoptions than she is. Let me say it further. We had a position on transracial adoption we've done since 1972. It's our considered position that only African people can take care of African children. They may not like that, but that's the policy. This sister was on national television to present our position. She could stand up against anybody. And there was a young lady out of Harvard University, I can't think of her name now, who was adamantly opposed to our position. But she could not even carry Tony's bottle of water. And then we began to discuss the issue. Her content was just that tight. Also, she ran what's called Roots Adoption Agency in Atlanta, Georgia, for over 25 years. It was the most successful Black adoption agency in the history, not just in the moment, but in the history of the United States of America. She's now past president of the National. So that's what we will do, and I think I did enough on Tony. Now, what I have not done is introduce our last speaker, and I am really not in a position to introduce her because I don't have her bio, other than to say that she is Sister Bernadette Denise Hawkins. And I met this queen about 3 months ago. It was actually May 1st, May 2nd in Baltimore, Maryland. She is representing Dr. Sharon McDaniel from Second Chance. Sharon talks, and she's Sharon McDaniel, and I know she will be equally as adept at this, but Sharon McDaniel is a preeminent expert on reunification of Black families in this country. She's with Second Chance in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and this is one of her colleagues. And I don't have her bio, so when she speaks, it's outside, she says, but when she speaks, I want her just to give you a little bit more background about what she does. So you'll forgive me for not having that information. So without further ado, I think I've covered everybody on stage. Am I correct? That's correct. Justin? Yeah. All right, brother. So what I'd like to do now is to ask Queen Sister Esmeralda Simmons to come and make her presentation. And from that point on, we will go in order. Everybody heard who's going to follow her, and you will not hear my big mouth again until I introduce Brother Chester.
Hotep. Good morning. Let Brother Sam do his thing. I'm speaking to all of you, so let me say bonsoir. Let me say buenos dias. Let me say, and of course I'm blanking right now. That's what I'm trying to say. That. And what's up, y'all? I got that one from Barbara Chuck Davis. No, this is not mine. My name is Esmeralda Simmons. I'm a racial justice attorney, and I'm going to put an outline on you. I'm not going to speak to you. I'm going to speak with you. Because this workshop, I'm not call it workshop, this spiritual experience needs to occur to all our people across this country, because we do not understand the very unique situation we're in. Yeah, and what is it that I'm speaking of? I'm speaking about Turtle Island, which is the real name for the landmass that the United States sits on as given to it by indigenous people. I'm speaking to you all as immigrants. Let me say that again. I'm speaking to you all as immigrants. Unless you came over pre-Columbus with our ancestors on the boats that came out of Timbuktu, you are all immigrants. Whether you came, as my grandmother did, in a cargo boat from St. Croix, or as my grandfather did, on a, quote, as a merchant. He wasn't a merchant, by the way, but he came as a merchant mariner from Montserrat, or as my husband did, on a plane from Haiti. We are all immigrants. But let's get clear here. Whether we consider ourselves to be Africans in the Americas, people who were born in South Carolina, bless you, brother. And what your family's going through right now. Bless you. North Carolina, Virginia, Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, poor folks in Texas, or Chicago, Illinois, or wherever, or like me, Brooklyn. We are all immigrants, but we need to understand that, in fact, what we think of as black folks in this country is probably a little distorted. The United States, this is our opportunity. The United States is the home to the African diaspora. Hear me. You have a unique opportunity. 4.2 million U.S. immigrants are African descendant people, and our immigration, hear this, there's a reason why 45 is acting particularly crazy about immigration. Listen, our immigration has not double, not triple, has fivefold increased since 1980. We are now 18% of all African descendant people, otherwise known as black folks, in the United States are immigrants. And by that I mean first generation immigrants. They came, their physical body came. Add to that, that's 1 in 10 of the black folks in the United States. Look around this room. 1 in 10. So let's do a little survey. How many of you are immigrants yourselves? Actually came in. What's this from here? Raise your hand up. How many of you are second generation, like me? Your parents came. So that means the rest of you are third, fourth, fifth, or maybe even 8th generation. But you are here and we are all here. What does that mean? That means that only in the United States, and some people say only in Brooklyn, but that's not true. Only in the United States can you go within your area and find people from all over the African world. The entire diaspora is at your fingertips. And what does that really mean? It means that if we got together, collectively, we can change our world. Every aspect would be covered. The entire breadth of the African world is in the United States. I'm going to say to you, because we know, and I want to speak of an organization that I'm a member of, the NAACP. I remember it was less than 20 years ago that they were anti-immigration. Can you imagine that? Don't worry. They wisened up. They realized that all people of African descent are our people, and that we are all immigrants. But more importantly, in order for us to move forward, we must recognize that you are me and I am you. And our beautiful, beautiful diversity of cultures. In other words, we're not all the same. We have a beautiful diversity of culture. So I'm going to start off by saying to you, with great reverence, up, you mighty people. You can conquer what you will. Let's see if I can get to the next slide. Okay. A little statistics, not a little, you have it on the screen. And anyone that wants a copy of this PowerPoint, put it on the postcard you have, it on the index card that you have, and hand it to me and I'll get it to you. 49% of black immigrants in the United States come from the Caribbean. The predominant nations are Jamaica and Haiti. That's right now. I give the sources of most of these statistics. That's from the 2016 ACS, American Community Survey. Roughly 16% of black immigrants are undocumented, and that's 575,000. But that's compare that to the roughly 25% of undocumented immigrants in the nation, and you see that most of the people who arrive in this nation that are of African ancestry are legal, they're documented. Yes, we have 500,000 that are not, but that's compared to the whole. Compared to other immigrants, let's get the myths out of our head. Don't listen to what the people tell you. Compared to other immigrants, immigrants of African ancestry are more highly educated. And you can talk to anybody who has an immigrant spouse, a grandfather, grandmother, whatever, and they'll tell you they came in with black and white degrees, they're this, that, the other. I talked to this, on YouTube too, talked to the Ethiopian cab driver today. Oh, that was yesterday. Oh, how many degrees did you come in here with? And they'll just lay it out to you. They didn't come here looking to be educated. They came here to get the money to send home. They are older. They come in as adults, most of them. Their average age is 37 years old. More likely to be married than Americans as a whole, and way over folks who were born in this country in terms of marriage. They are sending gobs of money home in money transfers. They are living very frugally, and most of the money that they make, other than to support themselves here and their family, goes back home to support the family at home. And here's the statistic that you've got to get. I've done a tremendous amount of work in child welfare. It's not in my bio. I can't put everything in my bio, but the Center for Law and Social Justice was a leading black organization doing legal advocacy for black children in the child welfare system in New York City for about 10 years. We had to change what they did. They were taking children away from immigrant families without giving them any documents in their language. Put something on the door in English. 2 days later, they come up, they take all the children. So, yes, we changed that, by the way. That's no longer happening in New York City. But let's go back to where are significant numbers of African immigrants, and by African, I mean anybody of African descent. Washington, D.C. Right here. Don't miss the opportunity to ask people that you run into in D.C. that are not at the conference where they're from. New York, Maryland, California, Miami, Minneapolis, Dallas, that's right, Dallas, Atlanta, Philadelphia, St. Louis, Houston. And I'm going to also add Florida. And for those of you that don't know, since this is slightly dated, This is in 2010. Also, you should know that North Carolina, South Carolina, huge places where people of African descent who are immigrating, where they go. And why do they go to those places? The climate is not so dissimilar from what they're experiencing, particularly West Coast of Africa. Languages, brother, I just found out here. But here are folks. Here are the languages that are spoken by our people. African English, American English. And I'll even say British English. Arabic, Igbo, Yoruba, Akan. I didn't even know this one. Lingala, French, Wolof, Twi, Kiswahili, Amharic, Somali. Here's another one I didn't know. Pronounce it for me. Tigrinya. Berber, Afrikaans, Hausa, Portuguese, Cape Verde, Creole, Spanish, and others. Let's now go to diversity of religions. I'm a Shango priest in the Lukumi tradition, which is a Yoruba, that's it. But, I should say but, our folks, immigrants, have practiced Christianity, Islam, traditional African religions, and I have to say others. Because, you know, we have a lot. And that's our strength. And now let's start looking at what we're facing. Oh, no, I said we. What we're facing. Home, food, shelter, clothing. In this country, that means that you have income. In order to satisfy the basics of food, shelter, clothing, you must have income. What do immigrants face when it comes to income? Let's look at it. Poverty level. 1 out of 5 black immigrants live below the poverty line. As compared, and look at this now, 28% of black folks born in this country live below the poverty line. You'll notice something. Is that out of 12 minutes? Or 7? Out of 12 minutes or 7? All right, I'm gonna go real fast, all right? Work sponsors may be predatory, whether they're doing domestic work or contract work. Please notice when you see somebody selling knockoff purses on the street, that person is an indentured servant. They owe their soul to the person who brought them over here, a lot of Senegalese brothers, and they have to give a percentage of their income every week to that sponsor for years. For years. And if they do not cooperate, the sponsor will often sick ice on them. I'll explain some of these terms to you later. They are underpaid as employees. Roughly, black immigrants make roughly of similar training, education, etc., make $8,000 annually less than their white counterparts. And understand, U.S.-born black people make $18,000 less than similarly situated Americans. Trafficking. This is a huge, I kept populating the screen because take a look at that map of Africa. Understand something. Please get this. It may be an immoral act. But what you have to understand that trafficking is business. Please get it. Trafficking is business. It's the business of using human beings as commodities. So if that sounds like chattel slavery to you, you got it. I'm highlighting a report, not because I like them, but what the U.S. State Department highlighted the areas on the map that are dark red as areas where there's a tremendous amount of trafficking coming from the continent. The areas in orange are slight, but not one African nation was in tier 1 that said they had protections against trafficking. So there's human trafficking of people of African descent on the continent as a regular business. The business in the U.S. is a $9.8 billion business. I'm going to also say that many African immigrants in the U.S. are victims of human trafficking. Sex trafficking is in your neighborhood. I have to say this. In my own experience with sex trafficking, one of the student leaders at Medgar College, where my center is located, was trafficked out, sold by her parents. Sold by her parents to Chinese men, sent over to China as a sex slave, escaped through NGOs in China, came back to the United States, and is now a student at Medgar College. She speaks like 15 languages. But yeah, this is what she went through. I also want you to know that on Fulton Street, across from the food town where I do my food shopping, there was a busted about 5 years ago, innocuous looking doorway that led to a brothel that had all these women in there, black women and a few Latinos, who were all sex slaves. They could not do anything but go to the door. They could not step beyond the door. We would see these women in the door, it looked like they were just hanging out. No, they were sex slaves. This is happening in your neighborhood. This is happening on your campus. Yeah. Moving on. Education. My own experience. Common disregard or disrespect for foreign educational credentials. It is easier for someone to go get a GED and to get the public education system in this country to recognize their degree from their home country. And understand something. They have to spend money to get a GED. That's income going out of their family, and for a nonsense degree, I'm not getting a GED. For something they don't really need. Because this country refuses to recognize their educational credentials. That goes all the way up to PhD and even MD. Due to English language differences and accents, our children are often assessed as being intellectually challenged or developmentally disabled. Because people in the public school system cannot understand what they say, cannot understand them, cannot understand how they're communicating. And cultural differences are outrageous. Immigrant students may be misunderstood and disciplined. I had one example that I used to talk about a lot, and that was a Jamaican child asking the teacher for a rubber. Persistent, I want a rubber, I want a rubber, I want a rubber. And he would go up to the white teacher and ask for a rubber. The teacher sent him, actually suspended him for sexual misconduct. You know what he was asking for? Erasers. That's a true story. That's a true story. Higher education. You don't know what they have to go through. First, you need a sponsor, someone who will be willing to assume financial responsibility for them. Sometimes the sponsor will not assume financial responsibility without the family of the student sending money. Secondly, immigrant or foreign students pay a completely different rate of tuition. They don't qualify for financial aid from the U.S. or local government. And we all know about the DACA dreamer folks who were born here as children who didn't even know that they were undocumented. And then they try to go to college and they can't even get accepted to college. Or if they get accepted to college, after they get their degree, they can't work. In New York, which I'm familiar with, both state education and the city education system have been accepting these students who went to high school. And I'm just going to run through the rest. Housing, debt or occupancy, new folks that come in all stay in the same one-bedroom apartment. Lower rate of home ownership, notwithstanding the fact that they make more money. higher foreclosure rates, predatory attack. Food access. Most immigrants of our folks, just like us, the rest of us, live in food deserts. Native foodstuffs, etc., are only available at specialty markets, and you pay a premium price for that. Water access, climate justice, that's all I have to say. Water access is that locally available bottled water is expensive and most of the time it's purified. Sugary soft drinks and artificially sweetened drinks are cheaper than water in our neighborhood. Healthcare and mental health. Healthcare is not universal. Spiritual practice. I already said that spiritual practices are diverse, but they are frowned upon. Anything that does not look like a typical Christian practice is frowned upon. Financial services, lack of access. Transportation, lack of access. ICE sweeps. They have been targeting African immigrants and people of African descent. More so than other nationals and other immigrants. That's why I say to you again, our opportunity lies in us realizing that they are trying to get rid of 1/5 of the people in this country that are of African descent. Even if you're naturalized, they say they're going to go back and look at your naturalization papers to see if you are alive. I'm going to end now. But understand the challenges are great, but we are the solution to that challenge. And how are we the solution to that challenge? We must start communicating with one another. If we can't speak each other's languages, get an app. If we don't understand the problem, ask. If we have relatives and neighbors that are bigots against immigrants, speak up. Because they are us, we are them. Only together can we win. Up, you mighty people.
All right. Thank you so much, Esmeralda. We wanted her to frame the issue, and she did, I think you will agree, quite well. And we want to just remind our presenters that, and I'll remind you, because of time constraints, they'll not be able to do the kind of presentation they would normally do. So we've asked them to confine their presentations to 7 minutes. And I wanted to make sure everyone knew that Chester Marshall will be sort of giving you some directions. So if you see him moving around, it means he's kind of winding down. That's one. 2, we want to try and make sure we reserve some time for you to ask questions. So if you will just bear with us, we're going to get through this. And I certainly want to in any way truncate Sister Esmeralda's presentation, because contextualizing this significant issue oftentimes takes much more time than we would want to, but we had to lay it out the way that she did. And thank you again, Esmeralda, for your excellent presentation. I want to just make one comment before our next speaker comes up. We've been joined by attorney Fire Rose Simon. Most of you are aware of the farmers lawsuit some years ago, the historic one. You're also aware of the Selma to Montgomery March that occurs every year. Attorney Fire Rose Saunders, stand up 1 second. She is the founder of Selma to Montgomery March. Everyone, the presidents have all gone down. This is the person who coordinates all of that. And again, forgive me, but my wife was the board chair of this organization, and she's been my friend for over 50 years. She and her husband, Senator Hank Saunders from Selma, Alabama. And if you have not been to Selma, Alabama, 19,000 people, 80% black, but it's the most racist place you will ever go. This sister was just arrested by the police in Selma, Alabama, because she took down a racist sign. And she was arrested in the front of her 11-year-old granddaughter. She was not even allowed the opportunity to have her husband, Senator Hank Saunders, who everybody in Alabama knows, to come and pick up her granddaughter. And I will not go through the whole story, but if you get a chance, just Google her, attorney Fire Rose Saunders in her case. Now, let me get back to our presentation. I just had to introduce her because she didn't walk in. So the next presenter is who? And the reason we're doing this is some of our presenters will have to leave just before we conclude our session. Dr. Johnson? You can come here or you can make your presentation from your seats, whichever is most comfortable for you.
Good morning, everyone. And I'm one of those who probably have to step out about 11:15, 11:20 this morning. I apologize, but I am grateful and blessed that I've been asked to be on 2 more panels this afternoon, including another one for Congressman Davis. So, thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. I am the 119th president of the National Medical Association, as you heard earlier this morning. And so I'm going to say a few words about some of the medical aspects of childhood separation. I'm going to first read the press release from our office on June 22nd, 2018, from our immediate past president, Dr. Doris Brown, and it announces migrant child separation from parents. The recent practice of separating migrant children from their respective parents' care is nothing less than tragic and inhumane. Childhood is considered the most important period of development in life. Research indicates that adverse childhood experiences, including traumatic stress, violent experiences, and emotional neglect, have been found to have lifelong negative consequences on health outcomes. Adverse child experiences can contribute to developmental disability, mental disorders, diabetes, heart attack, obesity, and other chronic diseases that already disproportionately impact populations of color. And I'll also add to that list cancer, COPD lung disease, chronic headaches, and liver disease, and autoimmune illnesses also. Therefore, any practice that promotes adverse childhood experiences should be immediately halted and reversed, with all those impacted receiving appropriate medical care. I'd like to add to that I believe separation of children from their parents in this era has become a couple of additional things. Child abuse, be it physical, sexual, or psychological. We've all heard the stories about what has gone on in these detention centers with children that have been separated from their parents. It has been all the above. We also know that these experiences are child neglect, both physical, not both, but also physical, emotional, and medical neglect in terms of the care that the children have received, the emotional neglect from not having the touch, the love, hearing the voice of their parent, and physical, because some of these children have been abused. We have heard reports of that. Why do these things occur? Because as we know, and some may not know, the human brain does not stop developing until the early to mid-20s. Typically early 20s for women, mid-20s for men. And so that affects what happens in terms of developmental abilities, the development of mental disorders also. We also know that these experiences put them in a chronic fight or flight response, meaning they are experiencing toxic stress. And what does stress do to the body? Who's heard of a chromosome? Everybody's heard of a chromosome, right? At the end of a chromosome is something called a telomere. Who's heard of a telomere? What happens is these telomeres get damaged. And that's why you get a lot of these physical illnesses that I've just mentioned, because the telomeres are being damaged from this toxic stress, from this fight or flight response. You put a child in a location, in a situation that they're not familiar with, and they are going to react like you would expect they would. They're scared, they're frightened, they're fearful, but they also may be agitated, irritable, uncooperative. They're stressing themselves out, and this is causing harm to their bodies. I mentioned in the statement from NMA, obesity. And what does obesity do to us? It increases our risk of diabetes, our risk of high blood pressure, of high cholesterol, ultimately strokes and heart attacks. These are lifelong effects that can start in childhood. On Wednesday, for the NMA Professional Development Series conference here, I was privileged to have what I believe is one of the greatest psychiatric minds to have walked this earth, Carl Bell, participate. And something that he told me about many years ago was a study that was done of obese women in California. They studied 100 and did a survey and asked them what were the adverse childhood experiences or experiences in life that they had experienced. Answering those questions were answers to sexual abuse, physical abuse, substance abuse, including alcohol or drugs. And the correlation is the more of those experiences they had, the greater their chance was that they were obese. And so you see this circle, this snowball effect developing of what potentially could happen because of exposure as a child. I would like to conclude that we must take into account the medical issues that come about because of childhood separation. And we must do everything within our power to hope that these experiences cease and desist in the not too distant future. Fortunately, National Medical Association is made up of multiple sections of specialists who all have taken some time in their sections this past summer at our conference to speak about issues related to childhood separation, also sexual trafficking, and we look forward to doing so in the future. So once again, I want to thank Congressman Davis and his staff, Brother Leonard, for this opportunity this morning to speak to you. I hope we get done with the presentations before I have to leave, but if not, it has been my honor to be here this morning. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm delighted and honored to be here. I know University of Michigan is not listed here on my card. It's Lewinsky Severe Foundation, so this is a different effort to bring mental health care to my hometown in southern Haiti. And so this is another part of my busy life. So that's why it's listed here, Lewinsky Severe Foundation. It's in honor of my father, who was a former family medicine doctor in Haiti. So my talk will be focused today on how we can reinforce access to and utilization of care. And I will be talking only for like 6-7 minutes, so I'll try to keep it brief. This will be my outline, pretty short, but will be hopefully quite rich. So by now we know that good mental health is essential to the psychosocial, physical, and economic well-being of the nation. Yet, as former speakers already mentioned, the mental health needs of U.S. Black individuals remain unmet, and their mental health conditions tend to persist. When it comes to immigration history and status, that actually adds another layer of complexity and within the Black community. And that can cause mental health problems or can exacerbate pre-existing mental health conditions. So, and why is that? Because there's like different type of stress that I think we already went through. And even personally, when I think of it, coming here in this country in 2013, as a physician who was very excited to do his residency in psychiatry, I also went through this list of stress, personal disclosure. So leaving one's country, acculturation, navigating the legal system. I remember I even received a letter from ICE with a month to leave the country because there was a stamp that was supposed to be on my paper that was not there, so I was declared illegal in the country. So that also brought a lot of stress at some point. Accessing the healthcare system in itself can be very, very difficult. Fear of losing scholarships. I've had students here coming from African countries on specific student visas. And when they're afraid, when they're experiencing under stress, they might have psychotic symptoms, which means hearing voices, seeing things that are not there. And this is quite stressful, but some of them will be afraid to seek mental health care, thinking that they will lose their actually scholarships or they will lose their student visas. And I've encountered patients like this. And there's so much we can do as providers to support them. And I'll talk about that. And also there's also fear of deportation and more. So when I talk about immigrants, I see immigrants like migrants with permanent residence, temporary migrants like foreign students, people on temporary protected status, humanitarian migrants, unauthorized migrants. And when we look at migrants and mental health care, immigrants use mental health services at a lower rate than non-immigrants, although they might need it equally or even more, and that put them at risk of untreated mental health conditions. And of course, the reasons for that, there are so many structural barriers, start with languages, lack of insurance, high cost of care, and also there are cultural barriers. I've worked a lot with Vodou practitioners in Haiti and also Vodou practitioners in the United States. I've encountered some of them. And you can see also there's a lot of cultural barriers in that regard when people feel that their cultural belief of what's going on is completely disregarded when they come across or encounter with a psychiatrist or any type of healthcare providers. So I will be leaving you today with a few practical recommendations, things that if you know, you can help your colleagues, your friends, someone in your community to access and utilize mental health care as much as possible. So we'll be talking about the problem of accessing to and utilize care. And first, I will say we need to recognize that this is a problem, access to care and utilizing care. And I think at an individual level, we need to start recognizing it. So a role model is here, Dr. Prim, and she's sitting right there. So one of her quotes that I was privileged to get from her was, social determinants of mental health such as racial discrimination, xenophobia, segregation, displacement, exclusion, and marginalization are among the most destructive aspects of harsh immigration policy that affect Black immigrants' families. Such negative forces can trigger fear, vulnerability, and insecurity, which is not a recipe for mental health. So just recognizing that, it's a start. Now, as an organization, if I take an example with the American Psychiatric Association, I would say we need also to recognize the problem there. So a quote from Dr. Levine from South Africa, and currently the CEO of the American Psychiatric Association. So they has long fought to ensure that everyone can access high quality mental health and substance abuse care, regardless of their race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, country of origin, and socioeconomic status. And not only recognizing the problem, but now we need to increase awareness about it. So last November, when it was issued that the temporary protected status will not be renewed for multiple countries, I started receiving, I was in Brooklyn, and a lot of primary care doctors were calling me and say, hey, we have a ton of patients coming in from Honduras, Haiti, and El Salvador, and they were also from other countries who they had no past psychiatric history, but they were experiencing symptoms of stress, not sleeping, not eating, not taking care for themselves, and of course that had a replication on their medical life, medical health. So, and that's when all of them, or most of them, had in common the fact that the TPS, the temporary protected status, was affecting their life. And a way I realized that maybe we could increase awareness about it was to go to the APA. Last May, they had an annual conference where they had 14,000 attendings, and then with colleagues of mine, so we had a booth. That's the first picture, and that's not the best picture of me, but where our work was there to increase awareness about the problem. And we surveyed 215 psychiatrists, and only 23% knew what we were talking about. So that means 77% were not aware that there was such specific issue right now with the temporary protected status, and that a lot of people were going through a lot of distress because of that. And at a community level also, we should be able to increase awareness. And if I take an example as a Haitian American Psychiatric Association, so they have a welfare and also a radio show where in Haitian Creole, and that's a way for them to reach out to the community. And once we increase awareness about the problem, how do we address the problem? So there are multiple ways. Those are just few examples. So I don't know how many of you are aware of those safety net clinics, hospitals, providers. They have legal obligation to provide health care regardless of insurance status, regardless of someone's ability to pay. So not just knowing that, we can guide someone who is in fear of being in touch with the healthcare system to seek care. And in different neighborhoods, I know it varies per state. Some states have limited access to this network of safety net clinics and hospitals. But there is states who has those. I think a lot of more people need to know about those. And also, it's kind of interesting to see sometimes people I come across to that don't know about whether or not they're eligible to even apply for health insurance, like Medicaid. And I think those are things that we need to encourage people to seek for. Ask at a clinic, can I apply for this? Can I get access to care? And culturally appropriate care. That in itself entails a lot. That can be a topic on its own, but when I see this as a cultural humility, curiosity to know what's going on in someone's life, sensitivity, and also having translator at a clinic to be able to connect with someone coming in and not speaking English well. Health policies, I think that's why we are all here. I do believe once we become aware of the problem, once we start increasing awareness, once we start thinking about ways to address the problem, that should be translated into our health policies. And I hope today also that these presentations will inform health policies. And fourth, recommendation, and I will finish with my fifth in a few seconds or minutes. So I actually last May in New York City, I realized that having a conversation about immigration status with someone can be difficult. People walk in our office, we talk about headache, how do you sleep, are you depressed? But when it comes to talk about immigration, it's kind of sensitive. Sometimes we don't even know who comes in, who has a visa who's expiring, who's on a work visa or just struggle with immigration, and we don't talk about those things who are causing a lot of stress. So last May again, I surveyed 215 psychiatrists at the conference and trying to see, and 30% of them were in training, 70% were in practice. I was trying to understand how much they have or how often they have conversation on immigration status with their patients. And that's when I realized 82% actually do it, maybe if it's necessary sometimes or almost never. And when I asked the other question 6 was, as a mental health provider, to what extent do you think actually this will be helpful to do? And it was interesting to see that the majority of the people who told me they don't do it or they do it sometimes, thought that it would be extremely valuable or very valuable to actually bring immigration status in the psychiatric encounter. And I think that in itself informs us that, well, maybe we need to bring more support to mental health providers to help them feel more comfortable having such conversations with the patients. So I think that in itself was eye-opening, and more will be coming from this work. So my last slide, I think diversity, equity, and inclusion should be part of our day-to-day initiative and effort to really bring access to care and encourage people to utilize care. Building a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion has multiplicative effects on the workforce, the people we train, and the community we serve. And I'm happy that I'm here today because I felt that this translated me being here and be able to impart this information with you. And thank you again. So I'm very sorry I have to leave right now, but if you have any questions, please, Leonard has my email address, which is my first name, Jennifer.Sevier, my last name, @hotmail.com. Thank you.
Thank you.
What's up, everybody? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
First of all, let me say that I'm honored to be here, and thank you, Congressman, for having us here, and thank you, Baba, for including me in this talk. The issue of immigration for African people starts with the Ma'afa. So I think it's important to put it in the historical context that our people were brought as, were trafficked, and I'm talking about human trafficking. And so we've been trafficked since the time we left the shores of Africa. We have been sexually abused, we have been molested, we have been put in incarcerated situations, and so this is not a new era for us. And so the Black Psychiatrists of America, which I am the CEO and medical director, does have a statement on its website about it because we have an historical relationship with human trafficking as people of color. What I want you to say, to understand, is that most of us just talk about sex trafficking. There's more to trafficking than just sex trafficking. There's the labor status of illegal trafficking. There's illegal organ harvesting that nobody ever wants to discuss. And then there is the issue of child soldiers. The child soldiers in the blood diamond trade in Africa is also part of the whole trafficking dynamic. When we talk about trafficking, human trafficking within the African American community, it doesn't raise an eyebrow. We hardly ever discuss it. It's somebody else's problem. There was a survey done by the African American Literacy Project in, first it was done in 2006 and redone in 2013. They surveyed 10,000 clergy of African descent, regardless of the denomination, to ask them what they thought the major problems were affecting not only immigrants, but within the United States of America, of Black people. The first thing was the need to strengthen Black male and male education. The second was to strengthen Black families. The third thing was poverty and unemployment. In 2013, this survey was done again, and they felt unemployment and poverty was number one. Strengthening and educating from pre-K to the 12th grade, and then strengthening families was number three. Nowhere, even amongst our clergy, did the issue of human trafficking become an issue. It wasn't even raised. We need to understand that globally there are about 800,000 people who are trafficked every year. And of those in the United States, there's between 14,500 and 17,500 people. And guess who 62% of those people are? People of African descent. And guess that 87% are under the age of 25. So what we have to look at is that our denial may be a defense mechanism, but we're not addressing the realities. And of these priorities that come up, 46% are sex trafficking, 27% are domestic workers, 10% are done in agriculture, 5% in business, and Other 12% is what they call miscellaneous, whatever the heck that is. I don't know what that means. But we have human trafficking among our immigrant population as well as those who are born in the United States. And it is not being addressed. And it is at every corner, from ambassadors, the domestic workers, all the way to certain Congress people who just recently got addressed in terms of Iowa from murder, and they were illegal aliens. But we only hear about those coming from the Latin American countries. We don't hear about those coming from the African countries. We don't hear about those within the United States of America. And so these young people are very vulnerable, men and women, young boys and young girls, because we seem to keep forgetting that young boys are also sexually trafficked. And so in the domestic field, in the agricultural field, and in the sexual trafficking field, that is where a lot of stuff comes in. And let me tell you something that goes on. Many of the immigrant children are attending job fairs, and they come for these job fairs. Your new traffickers now are very, very slick. They are not only just using the old regular means, but they have social media. And they have social media that invites you for job fairs. The young people come for job fairs and they get abducted. They get abducted, and then you don't see them again because they came thinking they were going to get a job, and they get conscripted into sex trafficking. You also have people who, while you hear about them in foreign countries, but we also have people, and recently, about 3 years ago, a number of clergy were arrested for having one of the largest human organ, illegal organ harvesting businesses going on in the New Jersey, New York area. So we're not really being conscious of what is going on. And we also need to understand that our major sporting events are the harbingers of sex trafficking. The Super Bowl has the highest incidence and prevalence of sex trafficking in America. And though we support all our sports events, but we forget that these people come in, these people who handle these trafficking in human beings will buy up a block of hotel rooms and bring these children in, and then you have largely people being conscripted to doing, young people being conscripted. And so they prey on the vulnerable. The vulnerable are people who are impoverished, people who who have difficult relationships, and many of these children are runaways because they're being abused at home, or they're being neglected at home, or other kinds of dynamics. So they prey on the psychology of the young mind, and then they're the children, the victims get arrested, and they get accused of prostitution. And some of them, in terms of immigrant children, are being deported because now they have a criminal record. And they have a criminal record for being a prostitute. But they're actually a victim and have someone who has been controlling every aspect of their lives. The problem that we have is that, like we have been denying our own issues and traumatic effects of human slavery, we're now also denying the issues of what is happening to our children. And when you have 62% of those children in the United States being trafficked, being of African descent, that is a scary, scary probability, don't you think? And so part of the issue is that when we look at the whole, and I'm not going to take my 7 minutes, I'm going to be done. That we have to look at the realities that most of these people, oftentimes within our own community, are serving as the brokers to the different people who are buying. The largest amount of people who are the recipients of sex trafficking are generally Caucasian males. But let's not mistake, there are many of our people facilitating that process. And we've been working, I'm with the World Circle Foundation, and I have flyers outside because we do conferences all over the world training healthcare professionals on human trafficking. This time we're going to be in India in December, but we also do them in the United States. And it's important to understand that we have ignored immigrant children and children within the United States of America, and that the laws that are enacted protect immigrants more than they do those children born here. That's a very important thing that we need to understand. And so I'm going to sit down, but I'm going to say to you that part of the difficulty we have currently with the current administration is that no one wants to address this issue as it relates to how much the immigrant issues and the problems at the border are instigating and agitating the number of young people who are going to be sexually abused, who are going to be trafficked, and who are going to be victimized as a result of our ignorance, our apathy, and our lack of concern. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. As Baba mentioned, I came into adoptions working, actually I was thinking in the probably 1980. I was, I think, 8 years old at that time. I'm a child prodigy. But it was very interesting. One of the things that I began to notice when I was in my master's program at Temple University, I began to look at the different perspectives about adoption based on whether or not I was looking at African American researchers or if I was looking at European researchers. And I'm seeing even now that the trends remain. So African American researchers were guiding me to think about what my experiences and understandings have been growing up in each segregated African American communities, where kinship families were taking in children without stigma. It wasn't called adoption, but Robert Hill coined the phrase informal adoption in one of his earlier research studies. And it shaped for me an idea or a perspective about how children should be cared for and the responsibility of communities to care for them. However, in the formal adoption community, we look at doing things that are very different from what kinship adoptions or kinship care does. In formal adoptions, we make a break in every way we possibly can between the child and their birth families. In terms of information, whether it has to do with who they are, whether it has to do with their history, their culture, their medical issues that run in their family, all of that is hidden, and it's called closed adoptions. When I began to look at international adoptions, I was even questioning more so what is going on here. And you probably have some of the similar questions that I have in terms of who gets adopted internationally and who adopts internationally. And so my question then becomes why? What is it about children in other countries that typically European Americans, because the United States is the largest country of adoptions internationally than any other country, but what is it that European Americans are looking for by going to other countries? And how does that happen? So we have supposedly protections for children who are adopted internationally through the Hague Convention. And there are about 80 countries who are a part of the Hague Convention. However, when I began to take a look at where were children coming from, of the 10 top countries that children come from internationally, there are probably only 2 or 3 that are in The Hague. So the 10 top are China, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ukraine, South Korea, India, Uganda, Ethiopia, Haiti, Colombia, and Taiwan. Of those, Haiti and India are the only 2 that I could identify that are in the Hague Convention. So the Hague Convention really was intended to keep birth families, typically spouses, from taking children out of a country and moving to another country without the benefit of protecting the child. And you've seen some of those stories where it's very, very confusing when the Hague Convention comes in terms of who should have what kinds of rights to the child. But there's also the Hague Convention on Adoption. And what it's intended to do on paper is to ensure that adoption procedures happen correctly, to be the watchdog for what they call child laundering and child trafficking. But what in fact happens is that if you look at the fact that of the top 10 countries, most of them are not Hague countries. So each country then has their own set of requirements in terms of whether or not you have to come into the country, how long you have to stay, how many times you have to come in, what is it that you really have to do in order to bring a child out from that country into America. And unfortunately, what I see happening is that adoption is a tremendously lucrative business for the people who are in it. And so this is where children are legally sold from one country into other countries. And what the Hague Convention does is it increases the expense to adoption as well. So you have another layer of people who can afford to adopt, which is probably why in those high-profile adoptions that you see, they're typically celebrities. And they typically have gone to a country where they're bringing back children who, interestingly, are very dark. And I still can't understand what is the attraction. But what I do know is that when one country shuts down adoptions, like I think Ghana just shut down adoptions, there's a kind of an underground communication system about Ghana is closed and now we can go to Ethiopia. Wow. So there's something that has been very, very uncomfortable to me about international adoption, particularly as it relates to children of African ancestry. And we don't also know when they come in the extent to which they are protected or the extent to which they are used for different reasons. What was it in 2010? I was fortunate to be able to go with the Institute for the Black World 21st Century and the National Association of Social Workers to Haiti after the earthquake. And one of the reasons that I was a part of that contingent was because there was a desire from the people in Haiti to be able to get children in Haiti adopted by people of African ancestry. However, it didn't happen. And it didn't happen because there was such a lock, and probably still is such a lock, in terms of the agencies and orphanages in Haiti that make money off of children. And at the point of the earthquake, even though Haiti was a Hague country, the doors were wide open because everybody was running in different directions. What do we do to help the families who have been affected by the earthquake? It's really unfortunate because during that time, children were going to a lot of European countries and through the United States and bypassing the kinds of protections and requirements that had been set up to ensure their safety. But I say that to say that Haiti is an example of how children got out even though there was a Hague Convention. But the majority of the children that are coming in through immigration are being some adopted in the country, even though once they come into the United States, there's another set of requirements that there are for children. But what we know is that where there are children, there are people who want to do harm to children. And I'm very, very uncomfortable even today about the children that have been ambushed and put into these internment camps from Mexico, because they're getting lost. Their families have no rights, the children are not being identified, the way in which they're coming in, they're not receiving any services and they're not being documented. And I truly believe when I look at the fact that in Texas, for instance, there was a rush to be able to get children serviced by agencies who are not doing the kinds of documentation that are needed to be able to reconnect children to families. Those children are forever gone, and we don't know really what is happening to them. We have anecdotal information for some of them, but the majority of them will get lost in some kind of system, whether it's human trafficking, sex trafficking, we just don't know. And so for the one thing that was helpful to me in 2009, the Evan Donaldson Foundation did a survey on the outcomes of adoption, looking at the identity development and self-esteem. And typically what would happen when I would do debates with people who had done research on adoption and transracial adoption in particular, is that I noticed that their research was typically on children, on the families, but not with the children. So to determine that a transracial adoption was successful, then the researchers would ask the adults, the parents, how do you feel about this? And they would say, it's working well. And even there was one team of researchers, Simon and ALC, who did several studies over time. And they were adamant. They were one of the ones that I would do debates with for the National Association of Black Social Workers on a regular basis. And I would look at their research and I would be able to identify that they had done nothing to try to identify or to define racial identity development, because it didn't matter to the families. The families said things like, we're all a member of the human race. The children as the research studies would continue, even when children were having problems, it was identified as not a problem with the adoption, but there was something wrong inherently with the child. So those were the kinds of things that I would raise in the debates in terms of looking at what they were looking at and what they were not looking at. And I asked them one time, why were they not looking at racial identity development? And they said, because it's not important and there is no such thing. So that was very eye-opening. But when the Evan Donaldson Foundation looked at transracial and transcultural adoption, it was a very, very large study, and it was the first one that actually talked to the adult adoptees to understand their experience. And most of the adoptees that they were surveying, that were included in the research, were from Asian countries. But I found some things that were very interesting in their findings. And one of the things was that as children got older, the issue of race and culture became more important. They made recommendations. They also found that, particularly for Asian adoptees, they had spent most of their growing up lives wanting to be white. They didn't really understand why. Now, of course, if you're, well, for most people of African ancestors, you might want to be, but you know that you can't be because of how you look. But what happens in those adoptions is that you have children who are doing things. We were looking at behaviors where children at young ages were rubbing their heads on the floor because they were trying to get their hair straight. I remember even in my personal experience, a transracial family coming in to look for another child with his black child, and he said, I wish I was white. And his father looked at him and said, no, you don't really mean that. And he said, that's easy for you to say. So the kinds of things that are very, very important in terms of racial identity development are things that are shunned in adoption and even more so in international adoptions, to the extent that in international adoption, some of our major adoption agencies will train their families to Americanize the children as soon as they can. As soon as they come in, don't dress them in their traditional dress, don't talk about their country, teach them English as soon as possible, get them used to American food. And the Eben Donaldson, based on their survey, they began to support what they called culture camps. But again, they found out that this was something that caused a lot of anxiety with the children, because the children were then put in environments where the majority of the year they had been in racially isolated and culturally isolated environments growing up, and then for a couple of weeks during the summer, they were put in a culture camp where they were supposed to learn something about who they were as Koreans or as Africans. So I would say that one of the things that we have to be very, very careful about is who is doing the research. Because even in the most recent research, while I was happy to see that 72%, that international adoptions have dropped 72% since 2005, that made me feel good. When I saw that article, I was like, yes, I wonder why. Let me look a little bit further in it. But the more I read the article, I realized that the authors were saying that this isn't really good. They were saying it wasn't good because they believe that when you take children out of another country, and this is this whole thing that adoption in some way is going to cure something, it doesn't help the country to take children out of a country and away from their family. It doesn't encourage anything that's going to be healthy and developmental, or it doesn't change any of the conditions, whether it's health or medical or food. It doesn't change any of that. It takes a child out of a country and puts them right back puts them into a different country, and supposedly we have done something well. Just know that when you're looking at research around adoptions and international adoptions in particular, you need to pay attention to who is writing it and what their ulterior motive is for saying that international adoptions is a good thing. I believe that it's a very precarious situation and something that we should take a look at in a lot of different ways and begin to have policies that help to bring services into countries rather than stripping children out of countries and bringing them into other countries.
As our next speaker comes to the podium, I wanted to just take one moment and recognize the presence of our dear friend, Sister Susan Taylor. She always takes time out of an extraordinarily busy schedule to show her love for the work that all of us do. And I want to just quickly contextualize why that's important. As you may or may not know, Susan's program, the National Mentoring Cares, I think that's the title of the program, is supported by a number of our Black professional organizations. We've worked with her over the past 6 or 7 years as she's developed this program. And I want all of you to know that she's now in 56 or 58 cities, Susan, is that correct? And she's doing great work. As you can appreciate, she also has a very demanding schedule. And I know she just stopped by to show her face, but I really wanted to thank you, Susan, for taking a moment to come by and show your love for all of our families here. When you have to leave, I know you've got to leave, but thank you so very much. She just got back from Egypt, and she's on a time schedule that's very funny for her. She's trying to wake up every morning to reactivate herself to this area.
But there's not a time I'm in your presence that I don't learn something that informs this work. After spending 37 years at Essence, the nonprofit world, it's not new anymore, but it's ever challenging. I never worry about money at Essence in the way that I do now. But I just heard a term that's going to inform just how we write about our work, and it's, I wrote it down, 72, racial identity development. So critical, and then it becomes more important as children grow older. I'm done.
great-grandkids and the great-great-grandkids. And out of that, I'd say 75% of them are females. So I'm kind of partial to females, and I kind of make it my business to know what's going on with the females in my family. And one of the things that, well, first of all, I'm Miriam Reynoso, and I belong to the Knights and Ladies of St. Peter Claver. That's the largest Black Catholic organization in the United States. And we have taken on, one of our mission statements is to deal with Black Lives Matter, criminal justice reform, domestic violence, human trafficking, and racism. So I have taken on human trafficking. And the thing that bothers me the most is that a lot of our young people really do not know what human trafficking is, how does it get started. How it gets started. You know, the things for us to look out for as the parent and the adults around. And so I've got a couple of apps here. And what I'd like to know is, I'm going to name something, and what I want to know is if you've ever heard of it before or used it. Would you please say so? Has anybody ever heard of Burn Book? Raise your hand if you've heard of it or used it. Burn Book, it's an app. Gather. Calculator. Slingshot. Whisper. Tango. My LOL. Kite. After school. Bumble. Live.me. Well, if you've heard of these, if you've used these are the means that's used to pull our young people into sex trafficking. We need to be very aware of that, because that has become a $150 billion business based upon our young people in our country, no place else, our country. $150 billion business. We need to educate as parents and as adults. We need to educate ourselves as to what our children are going through. I have a 15-year-old great-granddaughter who decided she wanted to run away from home. She wasn't being mistreated, good home, clean, plenty to eat. She has 3 generations looking after her. But she didn't like the rules that was being set down. So she decided that she was going to run away. 2 o'clock in the morning, she climbs out the window. How many of you all have climbed out a window? Okay, all right. Same, you know, nice tree by my bedroom window, I was gone. But at 2 o'clock in the morning, she decided that she wanted to run. And a 32-year-old man happened to see her at 2 o'clock in the morning, pulled up beside her, asked her, "What are you doing out here?" "I'm trying to get to my father's house." Her and her mother were separate. My mother's remarried again. He said, "Well, let me take you." Well, what about the grace of God? The man did take her to her father's house. So her punishment was to come and stay with her great-grandma for a week, because we're going to clean and talk. You know how grandma did? You would bring you over and you cleaned and you talked and you cleaned and you talked. And you got cleaned on the inside at the same time you was cleaning them drawers and so forth. And we talked. And this young child, my great-granddaughter, didn't have a clue about sex trafficking. Didn't even know what I was talking about. But I can assure you, before she left, she could be able to go back and teach it. And this is not what I prepared to give you, believe you me, after I've heard all these other beautiful women talking about sex trafficking. This was not what I had planned on talking about. But we have to identify sex trafficking is a social stigma. And some of ours go unidentified because they're silenced by fear or control of the trafficker. They're misidentified. And treatments for only the surface issues, as we've heard our psychiatrist is talking about, the surface issues. But most sex trafficking children are instead treated for drug abuse, alcohol abuse, domestic violence, delinquency, teenage pregnancy, STDs, and abortion. Why are our children being subjected to things like that when we have control of the situation? But are we giving the time that is needed to give the control with our children? Because some of the most beautiful children sitting here today, how many of you are going to take back what you learned today to your friends and pass it on? It's one of the most important things we could do. And there's so many ways to take actions against domestic minor sex trafficking, and we're doing it right now. Holding town hall meetings, holding meetings, talking to our legislators, talking to our congresspeople. We need to host events in our community dealing with this. Look at the young lady that was held for 18 years. And next door neighbors never even knew she was there. We must learn. My grandson went out on his first date, 15 years old, asked his mom, could he take this young lady to the show? She said, yeah, you could go. She drove him and the young lady to the show. She was 3 rows behind. But when she came to pick the young lady up, the young lady come running out the door. No, first time he's ever been there. No adult came out to see where she was going or who she was going with. When the show was over, she took the young lady home, told her son, you're going to walk her to the door, and I want some kind of adult to be there. I said, you make sure you take a picture of her and she get to the door so you can show this is how I delivered her. As they pull up, there's a car in the driveway, there's a woman in the car smoking. Well, you know what she's smoking, it went down now. I don't know what you call it now. Kids tease me, I still say reefer. But this is what she was sitting there smoking. And I don't believe it was medical marijuana. She finally got out, my daughter went over and introduced herself and said, I am David's mother. I just wanted to thank you for allowing your daughter to go out to the show with you. And that was the end of it. She came on in. Of the 6 children I have 5 were girls. I mean, I'm kind of tough. 5 girls. Every time a girl, my daughter went out on a date, I was there, went to the door, went behind the car and wrote the license plates down. You know, and here, my mom gave me a dime. How many of y'all had a dime you had to keep in your bosom? Okay, you know what I mean? My mom gave me a dime. Theirs was a phone. You know, you make sure you hold this phone to go home. So I'm going to cut this short, but I'm looking at what we must do as adults to stop this from what's going on and how we help our young people. This is beautiful. Whoever arranged for the young people, and I watch when I come here, and I'm thankful for Dr. Wilson, who's always dragging me to come here, to allow me to have the exposure that I'm having, and to see the young people that adults are taking the time to say, come, I want you to see the other side. Find something to do when you go home, folks. It's going to deal with our children and keep them safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sister Reno. So we've been sort of pushed to conclude this session, and I'm not sure how much time we have left at all. I'm hearing none. So I guess we're just going to have to conclude. What else can I tell you? We have 2 other presenters who were supposed to present, but time has been cut short. So I'll
Go ahead.
2 minutes each? Okay. Kate, 2 minutes, and Sister Hawkins, 2 minutes. Yeah.
Why is my brother with that?
You know, Congressman, I want to bow in respect for everybody on the panel. One of the things I wanted to do at Chicago State was to name a facility after you. I'm sorry we didn't get to do that, but I hope we'll get to do that one day. I think when you listen to all of the conversation that's been had here, the theme that keeps running through all of it is an understanding of culture. That if you understand the culture of the people, it is easy to deal with them on a one-on-one basis. And so I want to emphasize to us that the thing that we need to do as a people is to begin to understand one another's culture in such a way that whether you're an Akan or an Ethiopian or whatever, that you're able to relate from a cultural perspective. Or even you're from New York or from California or wherever, that cultural connection is there. I also want to recommend that perhaps as we look at all of this discussion, that schools of social work embed in their curriculum exchange programs to Africa, so that students can go and learn about the culture and learn about a lot of people and learn about things, have exchanges with one another, bring African social workers to America, send African social workers to, and not just social workers, but people of color, back to Africa so that one understands one another. The other thing that I think is key here is data collection. And it's that it is key that we collect the right kinds of data, because when you collect data, you can disaggregate it. And when you disaggregate data, then you can understand what's going on in the data. And when you understand what's going on in data, then you can put forth the right kinds of policies and programs to deal with it. Thank you very much.
As I say, the last but hopefully not least. Good morning. My name is B. Denise Hawkins. I am a writer, editor, and communications director at the Second Chance Incorporated in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I bring greetings and regrets from our dynamic president and CEO and founder, Dr. Sharon McDaniel, who wanted to be here today but wasn't able to come to Washington. So I'm representing her and the organization this morning on this really important issue. And the speaker before me kind of paved the way. He talked about the importance of culture and understanding the culture of a people. And that really gets to the heart of the work that we do every day as an agency, providing support for families in kinship care. Those families are referred to us by DHS, and we help to place children when they are separated from their families with relatives and kin, people who are like family. So that's at the heart of our work. And what makes the work that we do so important, especially when we look at it through the lens of the most recent immigration crisis, is like all of you, we were, reading our media feeds and hearing the news and watching families and children being ripped from their parents on a day-to-day basis at our borders. But then we looked deeper at what's really happening every day and has historically happened to our own children here at home within our borders. They are being separated, and most of them look like us in this room. And so we double down and focus more on the reunification. That's really at the heart of it. Our children have been separated and taken away, even if they have parents, one or two parents. And the reason that they end up often in foster care is because of poverty, not because they don't have a parent or a loving family. But unfortunately, they're punished because their families fall on hard times. Their parents can't make it, and so they're separated. But the work that we do every day is to try to reunify families whenever possible through a series of programs and services and supports. But in addition to bringing families together, what's also important in the work that we do is connecting them with community and support systems and services and people who are in the community. That's just as important. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Congressman, you want to close this
Well,
out?
the only thing I really want to do is apologize to my brothers from Philadelphia, Representative White Evans, whose group is waiting to come in here. And so, any juice we have left, you can have those. And we invite you to come to our reception at 5 o'clock in the hotel at the Rouse Restaurant. And everybody can come. Everybody. Thank you all.